You fuckers are a part of the problem. This morning, I've not been reading a newspaper like some of you. I like to have my morning coffee reading some of the comments to my ads, and they're all along the similar vein. Landlords are scum, you're parasites, you're a part of the problem. And there's some truth to that, I imagine, but this has kind of been a general theme for a while, and in my opinion, we're losing part of the fundamental realities, and between you and me, it's starting to piss me off. Landlords and investors are consistently blacklisted, slagged off, and loads of government decisions, especially recently, are just really not helping make the market a better place. And what it's doing is creating this environment where there's just hate and pointing at the wrong people, and it feels like this blanket opinion is put out there with no real knowledge or insight into the people that have these properties, look after them, and provide access to safe housing. And you're either somebody watching this where you're wanting to be an investor, or you are an investor, or you're one of those people that hate us landlords. And I hope both types of people are watching this video, because I really think I can help shift what the problem really is and give some insight into what I think we could do about it. Just so we're all clear, what is the problem? Well, the problem is property prices are going up crazy, and of course rents are going up crazy, and we need somebody to hate. And this is where politically we have a little bit of a shift in the UK versus other countries. So for example, in America, the hate is towards politicians, and a lot of the media message is about your conservative, you're the XYZ, whatever it is, and we have these political parties against each other. In the UK, we don't really have that. The media is very much the poor against the rich, and the definition of rich has really changed, because the rich is like hundreds of millions or whatever, whereas now if you're a landlord, you're kind of portioned into that. So that's the situation we're in. The reality is, it's absolute bullshit. The average landlord in the UK has 2.5 properties, and I know that's not realistic, by the way, but the average person that you know as rich owns 2 buy-to-lets, which means they've saved almost their entire life to put together the deposit to buy 2 or 3 properties. So what's really causing this frustration? Number one, property shortage. There's a shortage of property in the UK. So just so you know, we are a tiny island, if you didn't know this, and we're quite populated. And what I mean by that is there's around 70 million people in the UK, and we don't actually have that much landmass. On top of that, we're legally only allowed to build on 6% of that landmass, which is kind of insane. And then we actually only do build on 3% of the landmass. So of the entirety of the UK, we actually only build on 3% of it. Why do we do that? Because it's not pragmatic. The other 3% that we're allowed to build on, the amount of infrastructure, it's not just putting bricks and mortar there, it's the gas lines, the utilities that need to go there, and it's just not pragmatic from a cost point of view. You need to wait until a developer, someone like Persimmons or something like that, can build 5,000 units before it becomes pragmatic, and on average they only make £1,500 per property that they develop. So here's the thing, there is a huge shortage, and that ultimately is the biggest problem. Think of it as, yes, it's supply and demand, i.e. too many people are looking for the properties available, but really it anchors around supply. So the fact that there is a huge shortage, right now it's around 1.5 million people looking for a home that doesn't exist right now, it's not really fair that landlords are villainized, because if you think about it this way, if you can buy a property, and I don't want to sound facetious, putting people down or anything like that, but if you're looking for a property and you don't have any deposit saved and you're going, the problem is the price is going up, it's like, no, you just have to face the reality. You've not done well enough, whether that's working hard enough, being disciplined with your money, or situational, of course, to actually get a deposit together. The fact that a property price has gone up 10 grand isn't the reason you're not buying a property. And then, of course, in the meantime, whilst you're working towards that, you need to be a renter, right? Obviously. Well, who the fuck are you renting from? Shock horror, it's not the fucking 1950s anymore. You're private rental. Well, who provides that private rental? a landlord. This is not the big conglomerates that we're talking about. It's Debbie and Steve down the road getting their first or second buy-to-let, trying to make a house your home. So without the private rental sector, there would be millions without a home to live in. You might think, really? Millions? Yes. In the UK right now, there's around 26 million residential homes. Give or take, 6 million of those are private rental sector. So 6 million homes are provided to tenants by us horrible landlords. And I'm not expecting you to go the other way and feel sorry for us, by the way, but genuinely, if that doesn't scream providing a service, what does? Over 21% of the UK has a home to live in right now because somebody worked hard enough to get money to invest in property. Number 2 problem, empty homes. As of October 2024, there's 720,000 empty homes in England. 354,000 people are believed to be homeless across the UK. Now, don't quote me on those figures. Obviously, there's a litmus test going across. So why are there so many empty properties? Because that kind of seems crazy, right? Well, number 1 is probate. So probate is when somebody passes away and they hand over their property, and it can often take years to go through probate. In fact, I'll give you an idea. We had one that had already gone through probate. We were then buying it. It turns out there was a second probate to do, and it took 9 months after probate had been signed off for it to go through. It's absolutely archaic. And during that time, by the way, the property can't be sold at all. So I've recently bought that one. I also bought another one through probate and confirmed it is a fucking nightmare. Number 2, mystery ownership. This is really crazy, but when there is an empty property, even with the local councils, they don't know the data. Often they can't even trace the owners because they're abroad or whatever. And by the way, that's not your typical local landlord, all right? That is the conglomerates that we're talking about there. So back in 2010, there were 2 main government schemes that assisted with purchasing and the refurbishment of these empty homes. And these had a massive impact. Within 6 years, the empty homes dropped by 20%. However, one of the schemes, which was the Empty Homes Programme, ended in 2016, and the other was far less appealing. And so suddenly, the appeal of sorting out these empty homes just went to shit. And they've got a lot lower rewards. So there's a new home bonus scheme. And by 2024, the number of the empty homes has gone back up 22%. I'm just going to say that. It went down by 20%, then they removed the incentive. Shock horror, when you don't incentivize people, what happens? Well, the problem comes back. In fact, it's gone up 22%, so pretty much cancelled each other out. And the long-term empty homes have risen by 32%. So many landlords do look into empty homes and probate properties and are more willing to tackle these wait times and investigate property that a standard homeowner won't be able to do. And you have to think logically. If you're looking to living the home, you're unlikely to take on a significant refurbishment, and you are unlikely to be patient enough to wait 9 to 12 months for probate. Obviously, is the government really doing enough to incentivize these local councils to investigate the empty homes in the area and give first-time buyers a helping hand to do this? I don't think so. And actually, I think that really would unlock it. Imagine if there's 700,000 homes that currently go to market, whether that's through rental or through purchasing. And the only way that's going to do it is by opening up to more markets. If we represent as private landlords 21% of the market, 19% is social housing, that's 60% of the UK is in ownership. If we could open it to that 16%, then that's going to be really good for everyone because it will help stabilize prices and at least mitigate prices going up as aggressively as they can. The third thing, and I think you can see a theme of who I'm really blaming here, it's the government. Lack of new builds, all right? 300,000. I can barely say it with a straight face. 300,000 new properties every single year. And I'm not knocking Starmer here. I'm knocking politics in general. What a fucking joke. What delusional arseholes. 300,000 new properties every single year. That's the target, which is meant to be kept up with, by the way, just to satiate the demand in some way. But this pledge is not really consistent, and it has never ever been met, okay? It has never been met. Between 2022 and 2023, there were 230,000 new homes. By the way, just so we're clear, that 300,000 doesn't even keep up with new demand, all right? And why does it not? Well, let's think logically. First of all, planning. Have you ever thought about getting planning on it? It is the most ridiculous, archaic, backward system I've ever fucking seen in the world. Like, genuinely, England has one of the best property markets because it's so old, but the systems and the processes are just as bloody old. It's ridiculous. Honestly, in fact, here's the biggest bullshit line. I will call out Starmer and his government here, is we're introducing AI into the planning process. Isn't that interesting? So once I've actually spoken to planners, they laughed at me because AI has been introduced, but not to speed up the planning process. It's to find mistakes that were made, and it's to get the archives onto a digital system. Kind of misleading there. But let's say they solved the planning problem. Let's just say they speed that up. Let's say they create an environment where the green space, outdoors protected, but we can develop without destroying that. And smart, eco builds, all of that. That can definitely be solved in the planning process. What then though? Where are these builders? Where are these builders that you're not paying properly, that the ecosystem around it, they're not coming out of nowhere, right? And then, of course, we go, well, then we need immigration, right? We need to get, well, back in the day, it was a lot of the Polish come over, right? And it was like, right, what does that create? Well, if you do too much immigration, then we've got hate towards immigration when it's actually a really positive thing, or can be a really positive thing. And then how are you incentivizing the right people to? It's not simple. And the thing is, actually, government don't do enough from an ecosystem point of view to think about, okay, how can we relax the planning? How can we incentivize these builds? How do we give grants to support it? Just to give you some stats on this, by the way, and this is as of April 2022, 8.2% of land in England is of developed use, okay? 91.1% is of non-developed use, and the remaining 0.2% is vacant. So just to be clear, that's of the 6% and the 3% that I said before. The top three land use groups were agriculture, 63.1%, forestry, open land and water, 20.1%, and residential gardens, 4.9%. By the way, I'm not knocking any of that, but when you think pragmatically, I think the government does a really good job of marketing. We're going to solve the housing crisis. Crack on, builders, get going. It's like, yeah, as if the builders are just sat there going, nah, I'm having my cup of tea this morning, I'm not going to do that. It's like, come on, man. Like, you need to think pragmatically. So in the 1980s, the Housing Act introduced the right to buy. And so this is kind of how we know it gave people the ability to buy their council properties and therefore sell them. And over the years, the council was sold off and it wasn't replaced. This is the thing, right? So if you go back to like the economics, 30% of the houses are owned outright right now in the UK, 30% are owner-occupier with a mortgage, 21% private rental sector, and 19% social housing. If you go back 50 years, it was more like 44% was social housing, barely any private rental sector, right? So they just scrapped them, they sold them off and didn't really think about the fact that that's great, that should help people buying, which by the way it hasn't, it's remained about that 60% total. But they didn't really think about what about all the people that needed to rent. So the challenge leaks into the private rental sector. And it's a really heavy topic because, and often this really creates a problem because the reality is the economics and the statistics haven't really changed. It's always been about 60% ownership, 40% rental. But the challenge is there's not been enough to introduce new stock to the market. So you might go, oh, ownership's more difficult. It's not. Like, factually, it's not. It's 60% of people still own, 40% rent. And of course, affordability, all of those things. But the reality is, what's happened is the population of the UK has increased quite dramatically. And that's not just through people reproducing and doing their thing. It's also immigration's become less policed, and I'm not sure. Immigration's good, or it can be good. Too much immigration puts too much strain, obviously, on from an economic point of view. I'm not talking about the moral side, but from an economics point of view, this puts a lot of strain. If we already have a housing shortage, and we've got a homeless problem with 375,000, I think it was, and we've got an immigration influx, it puts too much strain on the infrastructure. And then we go back to thinking about little Dave, Sarah, Sally, Jake, whoever you want to say, trying to get their first home. And it's like, well, who's their competition? And of course, the obvious people to hate is me is the other people buying 2 or 3 homes, but not thinking about the billions in funding that's going through Lloyds, Aviva, all of these massive conglomerates, and of course government funding for all of these things. Your competition isn't Dave down the road, Pete trying to buy 2 or 3 properties. It's the government pumping money into something. And I'm not saying it's right or wrong. I'm not sure I know how to solve it either. But maybe we can look at the core of the problem a bit better. The next challenge we have is tax. So imagine for a second you own a shop, and imagine you get taxed on every pound that you take from a customer before any of your expenses. So your cost of goods, your rent. Well, mortgage interest relief was scrapped for a lot of landlords. You have to understand that over the last 5, 6, 7 years, people have been buying in limited companies. But prior to that, and it's something called Section 24 that came in, almost everyone bought in their personal names because that's just the way it was done, right? You're a small landlord buying 2 or 3 properties. Why would you set up a company? I'm not a business, right? But the government really shifted that, and they wanted to pressure people to own in business. And it's all about transparency of data where they can track it a lot more. But here's what Section 24 did. The interest, so how do you grow any business? With debt. Interest would take up a huge part of their costs, and so you would expense that, and then what's left is your profit, and landlords would pay tax on that. That's fair enough, right? But Section 24 basically meant that your interest no longer counts as an expense. Well, imagine you've built your business, and I said your income's £2,000, and your costs are £1,000, and now you need to pay 20% tax on that £1,000 profit. Or 40% tax if you're a higher income tax. Let's go with 40%. So you paid £400 in tax and you've got £600 left over. You're not particularly happy about that, are you? Considering it's 20% of your whole revenue, but you kind of get it. What if I said, actually, I'm coming up with a new rule. I've just changed the landscape just because I can. You know, just because I can do that now. And now that interest, that £1,000 worth of cost, that no longer counts as an expense. And so you haven't made £1,000 profit now, you've now made £2,000 profit. And now you're going to get taxed on that £2,000 at 40%. So now you're going to get taxed £800. The outcome is before you walked away with £600 profit, and now you're walking away with £200 profit because of that increased tax liability. Now you might hate landlords, but does that genuinely seem fair? What do you think this does? You think, ha, screw you, landlord. Yeah, okay. Well, let's think logically about that. I've got 2 choices. Let me ask you an honest question. I hope some renters are watching it. I really do. If you're watching this, if you were a landlord, put whether you feel sorry for them or you think they're rich, all of that to a side. If you saved up £60,000 and you invested it, and now your rent has gone down so much that you're making a pittance in return, what would you do? Well, let me ask you this. Would you keep it as is? Probably not. Well, what happens is a load of people decided, I'm just going to sell the properties. Good! Give it back to the people, right? No, because those that can buy, and those that can't. So what happens to all of those people that need to rent? Well, suddenly the demand for rental is still the same. Let's just say that it's not. It's actually gone up. It's the same. But now the supply of rentals has gone down. Well, what do you think happens? Supply versus demand. There's now 10 of you wanting to rent this one property, whereas before there were 3 of you. Therefore, anyone that keeps their rental has to increase their rental prices in order to make a profit, because otherwise, why would they buy them? Suddenly, by this small shift in tax, the irony is less people want to pay that much tax, obviously, so less people do. So they sell off the properties, there's less supply, there's less tax for the government anyway, you're just getting more per person, but less people paying tax, and of course that impacts the renter as well, because every shift that impacts a landlord will eventually get passed on to a renter. So why are we not linking tax incentives to landlords who actually offer long-term tenancies with a good, high-quality property for them? I think that would be a really good solution. So landlords are often getting the blame for first-time buyers not being able to get on the market, right? But actually, there was a huge study, an academic blog that was headed by Fergus Cumming and John Lewis, that essentially said that the rise in real house prices since 2000 can be explained almost entirely by lower interest rates. Mad that, isn't it? It increases the scarcity of the rental market and the property market in general. Let me just explain this to you. If you wanted to buy property, be honest here, when you were buying a property to live in, did you go, right, what's a really comfortable affordability that I can do? Oh, do you know what? It's a £200,000 house. Well, let's get a 150 grand house. Let's just be frugal with our money. Like shit, did you? You did what everyone else did, and you went, what is the maximum I'm allowed to borrow? And let's say it worked out that I could buy a £300,000 house, and then you went on Rightmove and looked at properties between 250 and 350. Tell me I'm wrong. And then you ended up looking at all those nice ones at 320, 330, and you tried to negotiate them. And you tried to get the most house you could get at the absolute max of your affordability. Why? Because you're a human being, all right? So think about that logically. What's the biggest cost to you buying a house? Debt. Because everyone, or almost everyone I know, uses mortgages. Well, if the cost of debt has gone down, then you can afford more. And unfortunately, most of us are not educated particularly well around finance at school. Let's face it, I definitely wasn't. And so what do? You don't go, do you know what? Interest rates are actually an all-time low. Maybe I'll really want to think about that, because if this is the cheapest it's going to be, it's only going to get more expensive. And shock horror, 5 years ago where the rates were 0. Fuck all and now they're 5%, people coming up to refinancing onto a variable rate and trying to get a new fixed rate, shock horror, I can no longer afford my mortgage. And I've had people coming in going, it was £900 a month and now it's £1,800 a month. Yes. It's not really understanding that near zero rates are actually a bit of a phenomenon, and they distorted our economy on an unprecedented scale. So whilst it is an oversimplification, central banks across the world cut the rates, which then cut the rates to lend into the banks that you know, Lloyds, NatWest, Halifax, all of that, which then lent you money at a lower rate, and you got greedy, didn't you? Because that's what we do. And so this cheap money filtered its way through everything, which then makes us get debts, B bills, C bills, private loans, credit cards, mortgage debt, and we pump it into everything. And shock horror, every asset, not just property, stocks, cryptocurrencies, gold, silver, everything massively inflated as a result. It's just the fact that property is the one that we think about most because it impacts everyone. Let's face it, if the price of gold went up 50% this year, a majority of us do not even hear about it because we just don't care. If the FTSE 100 went up 8% this year, most people are not impacted. Whereas if property went up 10%, you're going to know about it. You're going to talk about it. You're going to read about it. All right. So this video is basically just bitching, isn't it? And the reality is, it is. There's a lot of challenges going along. I think what upsets me is there's a lot of anger towards the wrong people. Now, by the way, us landlords absolutely do contribute towards prices. Let's face it, if you're a first-time buyer and I'm buying against you and I offer £2,000 more, then you've missed out on that home. But the reality is, most investors are looking to get a good return on their money. Most investors are not looking to pay more than the property's worth, all right? Whereas a first-time buyer typically will. We are a part of the problem and we have to accept that. And I think there's a lot as investors that we can do to just at least make sure that we're providing a great home. Maybe work with charities, maybe use some of the profits to donate towards charities to help people go from homeless to having their first home. But the bigger problem is understanding that it's a supply issue, not a demand issue. The supply issue can be helped by incentivizing through taxes, incentivizing through planning, incentivizing through education, and making it a better industry to be a part of. I'm talking electricians, builders, bricklayers, laborers, and incentivize people to get back to working with their hands. And it's just really been damaged since COVID, actually, because it created fear in the market that is getting replaced by AI and things like that. And the reality is, unless we solve these at a systemic level, a governmental level, then it's not going to change. So here's my part in line. Why is there a housing shortage? Because the government wants there to be a housing shortage. A housing shortage is architected, it's designed, it's very deliberate. And as soon as you understand that, the powers that be, and I'm not going into woo-woo land here, we live in the world that the higher powers want us to live in. That is it. It really is that simple. The reality is, it's amazing through COVID how billions of pounds suddenly turned up. It's amazing through war efforts how trillions end up turning up. The world is governed by debt. We could easily open up planning regulations, easily give incentives and funding to develop more, but the reality is nobody actually wants it. Okay, the only people that want it that are on the other side of it, and the reality is if we did that, prices stagnate or go down, which is not in the interest of the country, it's in the interest of a few people. And that sucks, and it's shit, but it is the world we live in, and it's not going to change. And so why am I even saying that? Well, first of all, point the anger in the right direction that can actually make change. Stop hating the players of the game. All right, if you were in a poker match and you're a shit player, you would not just keep getting upset with the person that keeps winning. You would learn the rules of poker. You'd learn how to read people. You'd maybe learn a bit of maths and you get better at the game. Here's the problem. People don't realize it's the game that's the problem. And the game is not going to change. So what you need to do is educate yourself around the world. And do you know what? Like, if you genuinely want to get educated on how you can be a better player in a game that is rigged against you, then put education in the comments. I actually educate people going from that side of the fence, from renter to owner, to passive to active, from being in debt to being an asset and contributor and making a shitload more money. And if you'd like to have a one-to-one call on how I can actually help you do that, then put education in. I'll send you a link. You can book that in. Stop relying on your environment changing. Stop focusing on the economy. Start focusing on your economy. I hope this has been helpful. It's been a bit of a rant, but there are bigger problems afoot, and you're very unlikely to impact on them. You can only impact what you do within the rules that you are regulated by. I hope this has been helpful. Hit subscribe if you're new to the channel. They're not all rambly like that. There is some genuine educational content on here that I think you'll find really valuable. Make sure to click like if you did get value from this, and I'll see you in the next video.